We are still working on getting our pocket ready to attach it to our shorts. And one of the first things I want to do is take my snips. When I stitched this before, I did not cut that thread very close on either side, and I'm going to cut those off a little closer just to make sure that everything is neat. Okay, and if you notice, I clipped one of those, and I'm going to do that again here just to remind you that you're going to take your scissors and you want to clip so that you leave, well, maybe about 1/8 of an inch right there at that edge, okay? Because that reduces the bulk on those corners. Now, we're going to flip this around, and in order to do that, the first thing I'm going to do is just take my finger and kind of pull that open with my thumbnail. I don't need a wooden iron to do that. I can just use my, even if you don't have a good nail, you can just use the palm part of your, or the pad part of your finger and flatten that out. And then when we flip it around, it makes it a whole lot easier to get a nice, neat edge right there. I'm going to do that on this other side too. And one of the things that we want to do is make sure that we have nice square corners. That's one of the things that you're going to be evaluated on. So there are lots of things that you can do to push those corners out. Some people use the point of scissors. I don't like to do that because they tend to be pretty pointy, and sometimes I'll poke a hole in there. But did you know that this little pointer thing right here actually is a pointer turner? So I can take that and stick it in the corner and give it a little push. I'm being careful because I don't want to poke a hole there. And then I can take it over here and do the exact same thing. I'm nudging it. I'm not jamming it. I'm just nudging it because I want a nice little corner there. And I'm just a little bit more here. Okay, that looks pretty good. All right, so now that I have this flipped over, remember we folded this 1.5 inches, and so I am going to make sure that it's 1.5 inches in the middle. I'm going to put my pin so that the head is on the outside because I'm going to stitch a little bit later. If I put my pin in this way, when I stitch, because I'm going to stitch from the outside, if I put my pin in that way, then I can't pull the pin out as I sew. But if I put my pin in so that the head is on the outside, even if you have the shorter pins, this will still work. Just make sure that the head is on the outside. And then I also want to check over here and make sure I've got 1.5 inches on both of those spots. All right, so I don't have my press cloth over here. I'm going to be really careful that I don't go over the pin, so I'm just using the point of the iron to do this. Okay, but I want that nice and flat and crisp because we are going to do some stitching from the front in just a minute. So I went and grabbed my press cloth because I'm going to be using pins and the iron, and I don't want to have a problem with that. So I'm going to scoot my little ironing surface over closer to me. I have this, and I have this, and I also have my seam gauge. And I need to set my seam gauge at 5/8 of an inch. 5/8 is the first little line past the center mark. Okay, and that's how wide we're going to fold this. I like to do the 2 long sides first and then do the bottom, so that is what I'm going to do. And I actually am going to start here, and I'm going to come all the way down to the bottom because I like to do 2 ends first, middle, middle, middle. And this part up here is already kind of tucked under. I'm going to put a pin there. I probably am only going to put one more here because we're going to press this and then we won't need our pins. And you know what? Before I start pressing anything, I'm going to take this tape off because I don't want it to get glued on there really tight. And never lay your tape down on the furniture or on the sewing machine or anything like that. If you notice, Miss Jones often walks around with a bunch of tape on the front of her pants. And that's because what I do then is I just keep them there until I get to a trash can, and then I can throw them away. Alrighty, so I've got that pressed, and if you want to, oh, I didn't get all the way through here. check again, put it in. You can, since this is a nice straight line, if you want to just kind of mush it down with your fingers, do a little bit of finger pressing. Again, we don't want to go back and forth like that on here because we'll end up stretching the side. So I only have a couple of pins. I'm going to put my press cloth over the top because I don't want to scratch my iron, and I'm just going to press along that edge. Okay? And then I really don't need my pins on there anymore. Remember, sometimes when you take the pins out, it's going to be hot, so be careful with that. All right, so again, this part's already taken care of here, and I'm just going to measure up to the end, like so, and put a pin in this side, and maybe only one more in the middle. You don't need a ton of pins for pressing as long as we are accurate with our measurements and we give it kind of a little mush before we start pressing. Okay, press cloth. I'm coming from this side because I really don't want to get those pins too hot. Okay, and I'm really not going over the heads of the pins. I'm only going over the body of them. Okay, again, take our pins out. Now, we're going to fold this up like this at the bottom, and sometimes we have a little bit of a problem with all this extra stuff here. So one of the things that I'm going to do is fold it up first, and then we're going to do a little bit of trimming. I'm going to turn this around this way. Do it sideways. And I always want to do the two ends first. If I don't do the two ends first, then sometimes I'll get a little dog ear sticking out over there. Hold it together and put my pin in. And then I'm going to come down here. Again, I want to make sure that that little edge is totally tucked under. And put a pin in. And then I'll put one more in the middle. And this time I'm going to turn it around this way so I don't have to press left-handed. Again, put my press cloth over the top. And I'm going to mush this just a little bit to make sure it's nice and flat before I put this on. I don't want it to wiggle around. Okay, and then that's pressed nice and flat. And when you get ready to put this on, you want to make sure that this bottom edge, it stays tucked under really well. I'm going to flip this over and give this one more little shot of steam here. So sometimes when we put this down, we get a little ear sticking out like that. And so one of the things that you can do is take just a little bit of a snip off here, not a lot. It kind of reduces the bulk. So I took it, I didn't even make a complete diagonal. I just took a little bit off of that corner. And I'm going to do the same over here, just not all the way to the corner because that'll leave me a raw edge. So just a little bit extra there, and that will reduce the bulk. Thread. And then I'm going to flip it over one more time and make sure that my little ears are not sticking out. And if they are, even at this point, when I'm pinning it on, I can pin this thing into submission so that that ear is not sticking out. And also, you don't want those little threads sticking out either. Okay, this is all pressed and ready for the top stitching. The next thing I need to do is mark the line for the top stitching and do the final bit of pinning.